Hi, my name is DJ Jeffries and I am the founder and editor of LeadToWin.com. In today's video, we'll be talking a little bit about transformative learning, particularly how coaches, so career coaches, life coaches, executive coaches, can make use of the theory in their practices. Now, I know many of you may be wondering, what exactly is transformative learning? And trust me, I will get into it in just a second. But before I do, I just want to take time and thank Dr. Ted Fleming, who's fostering transformative learning course at the Teachers College of Columbia University, provided me the opportunity and the space to actually produce this video. Transformative learning was originally introduced by Dr. Jack Mezirow, and in his 1997 article, Mezirow defines transformative learning as the process of using a prior interpretation to construe a new or revised interpretation of the meaning of one's experience in order to guide future action. Now, there are a number of components related to transformative learning, but for me, what it really boils down to is as we learn more, we take these new lessons and allow them to help us update our existing schemas and to change our perspective. And so I think it's important to note that this is a theory particularly related to adult learning. And so adults often bring to every learning situation different experiences that as they get more information, they can put those experiences in different contexts and use that context to update their existing schemas. Another key component of transformative learning is critical reflection. And the idea here being that as we critically reflect on our past experiences and prior held beliefs, we can shift our worldview by challenging things that we had previously taken for granted. An example of this type of transformation was written about by Mezirow back in 1978 in one of his articles where he talks about a woman who returns to school and she is very successful in school until she encounters a very demanding female professor. And upon reflecting on this experience, she realizes that she is reenacting an old script, if you will, because she had had some experiences with a demanding parent. And as she was able to become more aware of her behavior and how this experience was replaying itself, so to speak, she was able to challenge that and change the script and experience what Mezirow would call a transformation. So in transformative learning, there are a few key phases that adult learners go through as they are transforming their prior notions. One of them is a very important concept known as a disorienting dilemma. And this is a situation where a learner comes in contact with something that's very different from their prior experiences, and they start to realize that, my prior experiences might not be reflective of what I need to be thinking now. And so this can be very uncomfortable. And I think a disorienting dilemma is best identified by the person experiencing it, but we know that sometimes people, for example, returning back to college after a long break can be a disorienting dilemma, or someone who has raised children for a long period of time and now the children are out of the house and they have to rethink what their life is going to look like. So all of these can relate to a disorienting dilemma. The next phase is kind of the self-examination. So after a disorienting dilemma, learners will often do an examination of their beliefs and their understandings. And so you can imagine in a situation where things are starting to change, they are looking for the reasons why their prior held beliefs, assumptions, perspectives are not adequate for helping them get through this new situation in front of them. A next phase is kind of this critical assessment of assumptions. And so this is really about reflecting and thinking about, what am I assuming about this? And is it right? And really challenging those previously held beliefs. And then it moves on to planning a course of action. So Now that I know what I know, now that I've challenged those previous held beliefs, what happens next? How do I move forward? And then there's the acquisition of knowledge or skills to carry out this new plan. So once you've charted out the plan about how you need to move forward, you have to, get the skills, the resources, the things that you actually need to move forward. And that lends itself to the next phase, which is exploring and trying out of new roles. Often, as I mentioned, disorienting dilemmas are putting people in situations where they're not comfortable and where their prior held beliefs don't hold up as they had previously. And so, in this situation, they often experiment and try new roles to try to adjust. And then finally, the phase is building self-efficacy and in these new roles and these new relationships. So this is the kind of, after you've been through the rock, this is coming out on the other side and adjusting, really adjusting to and taking on new perspectives that are inclusive of your prior experience as well as the experiences that you've more recently had and had to adapt to. I also want to talk briefly about some of the work of Dr. Ted Fleming, who looks at transformative learning and how it relates to critical theory as progressed in the work of Jürgen Habermas, as well as the need for recognition as progressed by the work of Axel Honneth. As transformative learning scholars have argued, a transformative learning experience often starts with a disorienting dilemma. And what Dr. Ted Fleming says in his 2016 article is that we might consider the idea of a disorienting dilemma as the need for recognition. And what I found so interesting about this article is that in it he says that in order to engage with adult learners and transformative learning, there needs to be three forms of self relating. So he says we need caring and loving individuals, or in our case, this will be teachers or coaches that are produced by those with self confidence, and that requires recognition of the, and I quote, reciprocal nature of legal rights, and as one might anticipate, we need a person who possesses self respect, which is the capacity to know one's own right, as defined by Dr. Ted Fleming, because they are in a better position to recognize the rights of others. And then, thirdly, he writes, a democratic discursive society requires the reciprocal recognition provided by work and solidarity. So, as you can see all throughout this research is the need for recognition and how that relates to transformative learning, and even the suggestion that the disorienting dilemma be understood as somewhat of an expression of a need for recognition. So the next question I'd like to address in this video is how can transformative learning be useful for coaches? And I'd like to start by referencing some of the work of Leena Atinmaki Pelkonen of University of Helsinki. And in her 2002 article, she talks about transformative learning as being, as described and proposed by Jack Mezirow, as being very crisis centered. And I think this is a very important critique of transformative learning, particularly as we think about disorienting dilemmas, because I think many of us would agree that it is very difficult and in some cases unethical to produce a disorienting dilemma for our clients. So then, how can we leverage the components of transformative learning, even if we cannot produce the disorienting dilemma, which in many cases is the first step in transformative learning? And so, as I think about what the takeaways are for coaches, I think that we first need to recognize that whether or not we produce them, and I definitely don't think we should go about producing disorienting dilemmas in people's lives, they are having them all the time. And I think as coaches, it's important that we recognize when people are having those disorienting dilemmas and we help support them along the process of reinterpreting those prior held beliefs and assumptions and using that to improve their quality of life and help them reach their goals. So I wanted to address this idea of transformative learning as being crisis centered for coaches who are probably thinking like, oh, well, I can't create a crisis. But we do know, and I think one of my favorite parts about learning about transformative learning is how they've leveraged this kind of narrative research where we organize our lives in stories and the stories that we tell about our lives. But as we get more information and different perspectives, we sometimes look back and see those stories aren't really what we first imagined them to be. And we can update those stories with new perspective and with fresh eyes, and we can see how those prior held beliefs and stories and understanding of those stories have impacted our behavior to this day. So, that being said, I also want to talk a little bit about the research that was done more recently about, particularly about the implications for coaching and how you can apply it in practice. And so this research was done by Christina Summit at St. Francis Xavier University and the government of Ontario, Canada. And so what was done in this research was interviewing a number of coaches. And what she found was that coaches are already doing transformative learning. They're already um, fostering these kind of environments where this transformative learning can happen, even if they aren't knowing it. But being conscious can allow you to more strategically create the conditions that allow for transformative learning. I think one of the clearest examples for me as a coach is that I often say that I want to create a safe space where my clients feel comfortable sharing with me, because if I don't know, how can we get past it? And I think some of the research found in this study was that all the participants, all the coaches described the emotional environment as a sacred or a safe space. And I think this is really one of the foundations for allowing transformative learning to happen, because it allows people to contribute their experiences, to think about their experiences, to question their experiences without fear of judgment. And another idea that came up was this idea of holding space, leaving room for the client to succeed. Another key theme referenced in this article was the idea of the learning and the coaching relationship. And I think it gels really well with the research about adult learning, which says that adult learners are very self directed. And so these coaches described putting their clients first, making sure their clients felt safe and empowered, but also recognizing that it is the client's responsibility and no one can take that away from you, but while at the same time empowering them to say, yes, you can actually do this, you can get this done regardless of what experiences you've had in the past. This time can be different, and there's something very uplifting and empowering about that. Another important aspect that they talked about in this was dialogue, and this is the language and the communication. So one thing that stuck out to me in this article was they said that they really think coaches really think long and deep about what language they're going to use to connect with their clients, and so they need to speak to the clients in a level that they understand and that they can relate to. Even if they're engaging with these theories such as transformative learning theory and other adult learning theories, they're doing so in a way that connects with the client, and I think that's very important. And then I think the final theme that was raised up was this idea of transformation. And this is super important to transformative learning, um, because it relates directly to the main idea of transformative learning. And what's challenging a challenge is that transformation looks different for everyone. And I think uh, some of the participants of the study even mentioned that they don't see transformation as linear. They said it can be circular, and they said it doesn't have a start and an end, so it's always in flux. And so partly that's encouraging, but also that is a challenge, because people go forward and then they go backwards, and they're not always moving in a linear direction, and that is something that as coaches we have to be aware of. So I'd like to leave with four key ideas that I think coaches can take from transformative learning. I think the first one is give your clients the chance to learn about different perspectives, the chance to challenge their existing beliefs, the chance to update their thinking. So I think that is super important, and that is the goal behind transformative learning, which argues that as we get more information, we take that information and we update our worldviews. So as far as you can, and as much as you can, give your clients the skills, the tools they need to be able to do that. The second thing I would say is help them question their assumptions. And you can do that by asking targeted questions in a way that doesn't put them on a defensive, but allows them to actually think about, why do I think that? Why is that true? What evidence do I have to suggest this? Can I do this? Is this too difficult? Is this actually going to be a challenge for me? Is this actually what I want out of my life? And so I think that is another key one. The next one I would say is recognize the power of stories and narratives, and help your clients to identify their transformative experiences. So, as I mentioned, I think we organize our lives in our stories, and the stories that we tell about ourselves, about our world, about others that we love and come in contact with, those really have an impact on our behavior, on our beliefs, on our worldview. And so, if you really think about the power and the stories that you tell, and you help your clients to think about those, it will go a long way as they try to move towards their goal. And then finally, I would say definitely make room for recognition. As I mentioned, some of the work of Dr. Ted Fleming about thinking of disorienting dilemmas as just a need for recognition. Definitely in your practices, try to make room for recognition, try to be self-confident, and try to have self-respect, and give that respect to your clients, and also acknowledge the challenges that they're facing as you are working with them. And I think if you do those things, and you are just aware in general of how transformative learning uh, looks and how you can foster it, I think that will help you go a long way towards delivering for your clients, which is what we all want to do. If you watched this video all the way to the end, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time. I hope that it was helpful for you, and I would invite you to follow me on Twitter at the DJ Jeffries, and on LinkedIn it's DJ Jeffries, and finally on my website, ledtowin.com, where we post motivational, inspirational, and personal stories. And we believe, like I mentioned throughout this post, that narratives have the power to transform. So thank you, and have a great day.